Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I make videos about health and fitness and all of those things, endurance sports. So if that's something that you're into, go on down there, click all the buttons and things and such, and you can subscribe and, meet all of your entertainment needs. YouTube really did think of everything for you. It's very convenient. Go on down there and click away. You'll thank me later, or not. It's up to you. Anyway. Today I am talking about Zwift power. This is a subject matter that has been requested of me on several occasions on my video. I am finally going to oblige and give you guys a bit of an introduction as to how Zwift power works, how you can use it in terms of racing here on the platform. Now, if you do intend to race on Zwift, I do recommend that you sign up for Zwift power. And if you intend to take it more seriously, it is going to be very important that you kind of understand how Zwift power works, because that's really where all the results are housed. Zwift results, if you haven't already understood this, are not the best in terms of their efficacy. There's things in terms of the results that are not filtered out that should be. We deal with things like sandbagging, which is people riding below their category, and it can be done unintentionally or intentionally. This is going to help filter some of that out, force people to race in the proper category, and teach people how to choose the right category. B, we have different levels of equipment. Certain power devices are known to be not the most trustworthy in terms of their results. It helps to filter out those so nobody is given an unfair advantage in the finishing results. And then of course, third and finally, whenever there's going to be some sort of competition, there's going to be a certain faction of individuals who are going to try to glean an unfair advantage. And this isn't going to fix all of that. People will always find a way to cheat or get an unfair advantage, but it does filter out a lot of the nonsense. So it's a very good resource for us to use. It's not perfect. Of course, there's limitations. Some people don't want to deal with the inconvenience, so not everybody who is racing legitimately is going to be on Zwift power. But it does really give a better framework than what exists in the Zwift platform to begin with. So I recommend signing up for Zwift power. Now, I'm not going to show you how to sign up for Zwift power. I'll put an article down below on how you can kind of walk through that process. The reason I'm not going to do that is A, those resources really do exist already, and B, I don't know, because of what I'll talk about in a few minutes, whether or not that's still going to be the process in another few weeks or another couple of months. So I'll talk about that in a second. But I do want to give you a couple of caveats here. Number one, I am not a power user when it comes to Zwift power. I am an incidental user of Zwift power, but you're going to find when I show you the screen grabs here that I don't really race. I've talked about this before. I don't race much on Zwift. I do race on occasion, and I do participate in some of the group rides and campaign events that I do like to get results for. But I do not have a use case really for Zwift racing. It does not really fit into my training protocol. I am an outdoor rider. If I lived in a more temperate area, I would be outdoors riding 90% of the time. I would come indoors for structure that could not be feasibly done outdoors, and I would be coming indoors for foul weather. Realistically, doing Zwift racing does not fit the profile of the road racing that I would find, so I do it more for fun. But if I'm looking for a workout, a VO2 max level workout, or a sweet spot workout, which is kind of what I find in a lot of the road races here on Zwift, I'd rather do that in a structured form. That is me personally. That is my own personal use case. I still think Zwift racing is great, and I think it could be an absolute blast, and I recommend everybody give it a try. They can really enjoy it, and that's where using Zwift power will really help you to get more enjoyment and more understanding out of it. So this is why I'm going to go through this. But I'm saying this because there's inevitably going to be one person that stands up and says, well, actually, you missed this, or didn't talk about this piece. I'm not claiming to be an expert when it comes to Zwift racing, or an expert when it comes to Zwift power. There are things that I've learned about the platform in my time here. I have a decent enough understanding of it to help steward new riders into using it, so that is the purpose of this video. Moving on to caveat number 2. You may or may not know the history of Zwift power, but it was created by 2 individuals a few years ago because they saw the need for better results on Zwift. They were just passionate about racing and realized that the results on Zwift really sucked, and they wanted to do something to get better results, and they shared this as a free resource with the community and did all of this work for free for a very long time. It still is a free resource to the community, but they started something really great. And then about a year ago, as things started to ramp up with Zwift, they started to see that they were getting a little bit outrun by the platform, and Zwift saw the value in Zwift power and realizing that they don't have a solution for results for the e-racing and the e-sport that they want to be involved in. So they pumped a little money to the guys over at Zwift power, which absolutely is the right move. They provided a great value to everybody. But now that things are continuing to explode in the Zwift world, and Zwift really wants to start to put a foothold into this e-sport paradigm and really needs to own this process, they finally bought out Zwift power back in November. So episode is no longer controlled by our two gentlemen friends who did such a great job for the community for a number of years. The reason I mention this is for a couple of reasons. Number one, they stumble out of the gate, as they always do when they launch a new feature set, and things were a little bit rocky for a while with results not posting in a timely manner. It looks like we're over the hump with that, but understand that there might be some glitches and things that aren't the best, because that's how Zwift does things sometimes. Another reason this is important is that you might start to see that things are going to be different in the coming weeks and months than what I am showing you today. Design elements may change, or navigational functionality may change a little bit as Zwift wants to kind of streamline this website. I'm assuming most of the meat and potatoes here will remain the same, and what I'm going to explain to you will still give you the understanding that you need. If they were going to do a wholesale rebuild, they would have done that by now and just bought out Zwift Power. But I think they're going to keep most of it the same, but some of it might look different, so just be aware of that. Another thing to note, and you'll see it at the top of the screen here, is that there used to be a very functional forum on Zwift Power where the community would kind of help walk each other through how to look at different results, what's going on, little nuances and things about the platform that they weren't understanding. And Zwift has decided to abandon that forum and point people towards Zwift.com to use the Zwift.com forums. And I understand why. They're trying to stabilize the website a little bit, take some of that traffic away, as well as have somebody monitor and moderate that forum mostly 24/7. But I am going to call a little bit of bullshit. And I'm calling bullshit because I take umbrage with the fact that we still have to use a third-party website to get results for Zwift. It's been years. Why they haven't been able to build this in is beyond my realm of comprehension. So whenever you need results for a race that's important to you, now you have to go off the platform, go to a completely different website, which runs very slowly, by the way. Hopefully that will be fixed with more resources that Zwift will provide it. You've got to load all these results. If you're doing it on a cell phone, it's even worse, right? You have to get these results, and then it's just a pain in the ass. It's inconvenient, right? You should be able to go on the companion app, and within a couple of minutes, you should be able to get the results that you need. The fact that now you have to go to yet another resource, so if you're on Zwift Power and there's something you don't understand, you want to post something in the forum, it's going to direct you back off that website, back to Zwift.com. Like, what the hell is with that? I'm hoping that they fold this into the Zwift.com umbrella so that they can embed that forum and make the linkage a little bit more clear-cut than navigating you away from it. But for the time being, it's important to note that the resources are kind of scattered right now. So I just wanted to note that the changes coming forward on Zwift Power are still kind of in flux right now, so that you'll understand that what I'm showing you today might not necessarily be accurate in a week. And if they do a wholesale rebuild, I will just have to remake a new video. But hopefully this will get you started. So when you log into Zwift Power, you're going to by default be placed on the events screens. And you'll see these tabs across the top: events, profile, friends, teams, leagues, series, segments, rankings, and forum. And then you'll see some sub tabs here. And then you'll see a big list. And you'll see on the top here, this is that disclaimer I was talking about for the forum, directing you away, just so you know you'll see this during the course of this video. But I'm going to start you on the profile tab, and then I'm going to move back to the events tab. And that's because I want to explain some of the framework behind categorization, so that once you understand that, it makes the events tab a lot more easy to read. So in the profile screen, you're going to see a couple of things here. You're going to see the picture from your Zwift profile, what level you're on. You have the ability to refresh your profile in case something has changed in Zwift and you see old information. You will have a link to your Strava profile. Then if you move to the center, you have your race ranking, so where you place in terms of the grand scheme of things on Zwift Power. If you expand the info here, you'll get your category, where you land in terms of your total category, your age group ranking, your weight group ranking. If you're a woman, you will have this area for women here. You'll have your team ranking, and then your country ranking. Below that, you will have your category here. And I'm going to talk more about categories in detail in a moment. But for women, you'll have two categories. You'll have your open category, so mixed with men and women, and then you'll have your women's only category. Sometimes those will be different, so I'll talk about that when I talk about categorization momentarily. But what categories use in Zwift Power is the top 3 results over the last 90 days. And what they're taking is 95% of your best 20-minute power in those events, and then it is going to use that to calculate your categories. Again, I'll go through that momentarily, but if you expand the information, it will give your best 3 results from the last 90 days. It will average them out, and that is how it is going to categorize you in terms of your minimum category. Now, you can manually upgrade if you think that you're at a higher level. So if you're somebody like me who doesn't race a lot on Zwift, so a lot of your results are not in your Zwift events, you may want to be an honest person and upgrade yourself manually, but you can't downgrade. So you need to race in that minimum category. Now, if you come off of training and those results start to fall off, then it'll downgrade you automatically. But you are not supposed to be racing underneath your minimum category. If you choose to do that, your results just won't count. Below that, you'll have your Z points. This is your points in terms of Zwift Power Racing, the country that you hail from, the United States for me, your team, if that's available, it'll be listed here, your FTP, and then your weight attached to it, and then you have your age category, whether you're a master, a junior, a senior, a veteran, things like that, that'll be listed here. If you move a little bit further to the right, you'll see a nice little chart that covers your distance, the meters climbed, your longest ride, and then your highest meters gained in terms of ride over the last 30 days. Over the total year, and then it'll give your overall totals on the right-hand side. And then along the bottom, you have a bit of a power curve outlet here that shows you your 15-second, 1 minute, 5 minute, and 20-minute power. I believe this is over the past 90 days, and it'll show you both a column for watts per kilogram as well as your raw watts. And that's going to be a lot of what builds your profile for racing. Now, for me personally, I know that this is inaccurate. The limitation there is it only pulls your power profile from actual events. So if you're in a group ride that qualifies, a workout that qualifies, or a race that qualifies, it will pull values from those events. But if you are doing just standalone workouts, and I've tested these values at much higher levels, that's not a flex, I'm just trying to help you to understand, it's not pulling those values here. So if I've only included group rides, which I've done it more of a steady state for the most part, this is undershooting my power values, so I might be under-categorized somewhere. So there is a bit of a limitation here, but this shows you what it's captured in terms of your events, and it's the same type of idea that they use to capture your total category. So it's going to be 90 days, and it's only capturing rides that are done in an event format that's official to Zwift Power. So just bear that in mind. Now along the right-hand side here, you will see some information, lists of riders. You will see something similar to this on USAC, where you can kind of choose your nemesis, people who have won against you in races, victims, people that you have won against in races. You can kind of show a common blend. This is probably going to be more effective for people who ride in series and race against the same people over and over again. Then you'll be able to see how you stack up there. You can expand to more riders, or you can see fewer riders, so I can kind of dip this down to the top handful, and I can either filter for team on or team off there. I'm not really sure how well this functionality works, but you can see it's kind of changing the teams there. But that's available for you in case you race in different series. That might be valuable to you. So before I go down below and show you how to read this data down here, let's jump over and talk about categorization. So in Zwift, there are 4 different categories to race in: A, B, C, and D. Sometimes all of them are available, sometimes only a couple of them are available. And then there's also a miscellaneous category of E. That's usually something that they might do for, maybe it's a group ride and they just want a women's only group ride, that will be in the E's, or maybe they'll put beginners in the E's, people who have never raced before. So that's usually a catch-all. So there's no real categorization for E, it's just a miscellaneous category they use for special events. Now in Zwift Power, there are 5 categories, and they've added this black A here, and this is the A+ category. And this is just a distinction for your very high level elite or even pro level riders that have achieved a particular power profile that is not for most of us humans, right? So that might qualify them for special events, but there really is no A+ category when it comes to Zwift, but there might be special events that only A+ riders are qualified for. So just be aware. Now I'm only showing 4 of them here. I've omitted D from the bottom, and the only reason I'm doing that is not to hurt the feelings of the people who are riding D, but there's no minimum benchmark for D. You start as a D and then you move your way through based on your power results. So basically there's no reason to cover D. That's where you will land until you graduate into one of these categories here. So I'm only going to be talking about A, B, and C. Now you'll see that I have a category, I will have the qualifications for that category, and I have an open category and a women category. They are a little bit different. I'll explain why that works, but you're going to see this is the math that they use to put you in a particular category on Zwift Power, and you are not supposed to race beneath the category that is elicited by Zwift Power. So you're not supposed to cat down. You can cat up manually if you want to, but if you ride below your category, you do end up having some disqualification issues. I'll talk about disqualification codes in a moment. But you will see for your A+ category, you have to meet a minimum of 4.6 watts per kilogram and 300 watts. Remember, I said 95% of the 20-minute best power, right? So that's how it's calculating. It's taking that average, and you have to be above 4.6 watts per kilogram and 300 watts to be placed in this category. I will talk about the raw wattage in a moment and why that's important and why that's actually a really good thing. The standard A category is above 4 watts per kilogram and 250 watts, and that for women is going to be 3.7 watts per kilogram. So the reason for that is in the real world, women are typically staggered a category below the men. And the reason for that is relative to our size, we tend to not be quite as strong as men. That's fine. We don't have the same size and raw wattage as men, so we have to compete at a different categorization level. There's nothing wrong with that. I have no problem saying that as a woman, so they've changed us to be a little bit more commensurate with outdoor riding. And there's no raw wattage category for women. And again, I'll talk about that in a moment. That is an important distinction. For your B category, for open, it's 3.2 watts per kilogram and 200 watts. Your women's category is 3.2 watts per kilogram. And then your C category is 2.5 watts per kilogram and 150 watts. And then 2.5 watts per kilogram for women. Now, the reason that they added in raw watts is because of something that actually I complained about a little bit about 18 months ago in a video. And it's not because I complained. This is just something I've mentioned. If you followed me for a while, you may have seen this video. But there is a distinct disadvantage for smaller riders and women on flat roads in Zwift. Now, I'm not here to contest that raw watts do rule flat roads. On a time trial, an individual who is capable of putting out more raw wattage, given that their aerodynamics are pretty much on par, they will almost always beat somebody who is lighter that has lower raw wattage, but they may have a higher watts per kilogram. I am not doubting that in terms of physics. What I am doubting is the fact that in a group, most of that goes away. You know, I'll give you a real world example. I can ride with guys that put out 300 watts on the road. I can tuck into the group, I can settle in at maybe a sweet spot, maybe even a threshold level effort, depends, and stay in there, stay tucked in, and stay connected to the group. If I tried to get in with a group of guys going 300 watts on Zwift, I'd get blown off the back before I can count to 10. It's just the way that the algorithm works. The drafting algorithm gives you a 25% benefit for speed against your output and nothing more. So it is exceptionally punitive to the smaller riders because it weights very heavily for the raw wattage. So unless a person is especially heavy with the high raw wattage, they're going to ride away from somebody who is lighter at a lesser raw wattage. So what they would find is that individuals who are capable of riding at a high watts per kilogram, you know, in excess of 4, that might be an A-level rider based on watts per kilogram, but they were smaller, they could never keep in contact with the A group, and they were just getting dropped every single ride because they did not have the mass or the raw wattage to keep up. And it's especially punitive to women that tend to be smaller, and then men who just run on the lighter side. So they ended up adding in this raw wattage that made a little bit more sense. So if your raw wattage doesn't meet the A category, you would not have to race with the A's and get dropped on fast, flat rides all the time. You can still ride with the B's without being called a dirty sandbagger. 4 watts per kilogram and 250 watts, that would put a rider at 62.5 kilograms. I'm not 62.5 kilograms. I am never going to be able to hold 250 watts. It's not going to be in my genetics. That would put me at an FTP at just about 5 watts per kilogram. I don't have the time to train for that. I don't have the genetic potential, I don't think, to train for that. So putting me in the A riders to be able to keep up at 250 watts is almost impossible for me. So I'm probably stuck here at an open B. And I'm perfectly happy with doing that. My profile should probably show me at a women's A and a men's or open B. And that's perfectly fair to me. Even if I'm above 4 watts per kilogram, I'm gonna get completely throttled on most of the rides. Now, I've got to use a little bit of common sense. If I'm going to do a hill climb or a hilltop finish, I probably shouldn't be an asshole and come in with the B's, because if I can hold 4 watts per kilogram and as a lighter rider getting the advantage on the climbs, maybe don't be an asshole and be in the B's. But for most of the variable road races, B is where I belong. So that's why that's important. That's why it might apply in the real world to you if you're a smaller rider or if you're a woman. That's where they've really done a lot to add this "and" here. This is very important. This was not here a year ago. This is something I complained about vehemently, and a lot of people did, and they added this last April, and I think it's really great. It helps to keep people from a forced upgrade when they're not capable of it. Let's talk about disqualification tags, because there are a number of things that will get you disqualified from an event, including racing out of your category. So this is something that you might see listed in terms of people who are disqualified from races, and this is what they mean. So I'm going to run through these real quick. I'm not going to go through in excruciating details, but this is something that you will see. So a code of UPG says entering the category below the minimum category assigned to you and visible on your profile. Performance is irrelevant. So if you are a B rider and you register with the Ds, you're going to get disqualified. Even if you ride at a D level and you don't sandbag in terms of your power, it doesn't care. You're going to get disqualified. That's why you need to ride at the category assigned to you by Zwift Power. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but you're going to get disqualified. Your watts per kilogram, or WKG. It's over category limits. Even if a rider enters the correct category, they may still be DQ'd if they breach the limit with a 0.1 watt per kilogram leeway. So you might be right on that hairy edge of maybe B to A. And if you hit that 4 watts per kilogram, you're not going to get disqualified, but you should probably think about it's time to upgrade, and 4.1 is going to disqualify you. So you get a little bit of leeway, but even if you've done everything in good faith to be in the right category, and then you just exceed the category limits, that's just what happens. It's time to upgrade. It's not really saying that you're sandbagging or a cheater. It just means that you've broken that threshold, and that's your trigger, time to upgrade. ZP, Z-Power users are not allowed in particular category or finishing positions. If you're not familiar with Z-Power, Z-Power is estimated power that's created by using a speed cadence sensor and then the resistance curve on a wheel-on trainer, so a dumb trainer. So if you don't have an actual source of power, Z-Power is what is providing you with the ability to ride on Zwift, and 95% of the time or better, it overreads. It just is what it is. It's an inaccurate number. I know people get really defensive when people say this, but how are you going to measure torque or force, right? Power is a function of force times velocity. You're not able to get a good read on force. You're making some estimates based on the wheel speed and the resistance curve without any understanding of gearing or pressure being put on the pedals. More often than not, it's wrong. So those results are really going to be left out of any type of placement results. Z-Power, honestly, Zwift Power is not probably of much value if you are on Z-Power. There's nothing wrong with being on Z-Power. Those numbers are consistent to themselves, and they're great for you to train and to gauge your improvement. But when it comes to racing, Z-Power really is not that accurate. And if you think that you're going to move to a real power meter or a smart trainer down the line, don't be surprised if your power numbers drop precipitously. That's okay. You just need to readjust what you're looking at, because this is just understood that it doesn't do the best job. Some people it ends up being a lot closer than others, but just understand that those are disqualified from results because they are highly, highly, highly inaccurate. HR, heart rate monitor is required for a particular category or finishing position. A lot of those races require you to wear a heart rate monitor to make sure that you're not just sitting on your couch with an Ant Plus simulator. It's just kind of a second level of protection against for other riders to make sure that your results are legitimate. And if you're not wearing a heart rate monitor, you'll get that HR. Height doping. You can get an advantage on the flats and descents by lowering your height. It will detect that if you see some kind of manipulation, so you'll get that code there. ZRVG, that is a suspended rider. If you're suspended and then you race anyway, you will get disqualified. New. That's anyone under 500 kilometers total distance and taking a podium. Now this is really interesting because you see this with the pros, you see these with a lot of elite and high-end riders. They jump on Zwift, they're super fit and they ride really well on the roads, and they get on Zwift and they're not winning races because it's a different animal. It runs differently, the algorithm runs differently, and they expect that there's a certain learning curve. So if you're under 500 kilometers on Zwift, it's not likely that you're winning races, so there's kind of a protection for that, and it gives you a little bit of a flag if you are a new rider and just all of a sudden you're winning races. Next is age. You entered the wrong category for an age-based race. I don't see a ton of those, but sometimes there are age-based races. So, you know, if you're 25 years old and you're joining a seniors race, you're going to get disqualified. You're in the wrong age range. NA is a race organizer, does not want results published, typically used in social rides to discourage flyers. So group rides are included in Zwift Power to help you get an appraisal. And some organizers just say, you know what, I don't want anybody focusing on results. I want to make sure that there's no rankings or classification there, so they just omit that with the NA. DQ is usually applied by the race organizer, applied for a variety of reasons. So if you use poor sportsmanship, if you're swearing on the platform, if you're doing something that's against the rules, maybe they've locked out power-ups during certain times of the game and you use one anyway, the race organizer can manually DQ you and they will get a DQ tag in Zwift Power. NE is not eligible. This is a manual entry that is made by the race organizer. So if you are in the championships or something to that effect, if you haven't met the eligibility requirements, you'll get that NE. ESS is being too far ahead of the beacon or leader at the start of an espresso lap. So this is usually in some kind of group ride where maybe everybody rides together for X number of laps, and then the last lap is, hey, balls to the walls, everybody go, and you race to the finish. If somebody's been a flyer and is far out in front and then finishes first, that person will be disqualified because they weren't close enough to the beacon at the start of that last lap. Map is not being transported to the correct world. I have never seen this happen, but apparently you can be screwed up in the algorithm somewhere and be on the wrong world, which would obviously change the dynamics of the race. If you're racing on Tempest Fugit and everybody else is racing on a completely different world, it's going to change the dynamics of the race. So you get that kind of disqualification there. And then you have 20-minute, 5-minute bullshit detector is triggered. There is something called CVAZ, which is CEVAZ, and that is basically, there is a qualification for a certain number of riders that we know that their power for 5 minutes and 20 minutes is above what most humans are capable of. There's only certain people who are qualified to those results, pros, elites level riders, but we know within a pretty reasonable degree of accuracy what normal people are capable of. And there's a 5-minute power and 20-minute power, both by raw wattage and by watts per kilogram. That is going to be something that we would accept out of a really good rider, and then it's just bullshit, right? So they have that worked into the system. And if you've exceeded those limits for 20 minutes or 5 minutes, and this is big numbers here. We're not talking about small potatoes here. You're going to get disqualified with these bullshit disqualification tags. And then lastly, there's a sticky or sticky ANT plus, and this is compelling evidence that you are taking advantage of a particular issue in terms of sticky power. I'm going to leave an article from Eric Schlangen's Zwift Power down below because he actually went and tested this out. But there's a problem with Zwift and certain standalone power meters. Somehow in the way that they record power from the Asiomas and the Vectors and a couple other power meters out there, that power sticks for 3 minutes. It's not a problem with the power meter because it doesn't show up on anything else but on Zwift. But what people can do is they can manipulate that, and they can pedal really hard and then stop for 3 seconds, and then the power will freeze on the screen so the avatar will keep going, and then they'll resume power, and then they'll rest for 3 seconds and resume it again. So it's kind of abusing it and kind of taking advantage of that hang time for the power to make sure their avatar keeps moving. So there's a way that they're able to kind of detect for that, and if they see any kind of legitimate manipulation of that, it's going to happen from time to time. It is what it is. But somebody who's actually repeatedly doing that to gain an advantage, it will catch that and it will disqualify you for that. So now that we've gone through disqualification tags, I'm going to buzz through the rest of the website. The rest of it will be really simple. I'll go through kind of what you're looking at on the site here. So back on your profile, if you scroll down, it will give you all of your list of results, and it can filter out your results. You can filter it by races, by just group rides, by workouts. I don't have anything in here for runs, but you can kind of filter everything out. You can also add in some extra columns if you want your 2-minute power, if you want your 5-second power, your height on here for your own personal. You can change that and customize that. And then you can also view it by watts per kilogram, which is the categorization level. Or if you want to see raw watts, you can absolutely do that as well and click on raw watts. So this is what you'll see. On the left-hand side, you'll see what category you registered for. Again, you can see I do mostly group rides, so my categorization is all over the road. It's not really matching my category. It'll show how you placed in any of those events, so it'll give you your total placing. It'll show you the date. It will give you a clickable link that will take you to the overall event and results. I'll talk about that momentarily. It will show you your average watts per kilogram for the entire ride. It will show you your average watts, and then it'll show you your normalized power. So if you do not know what normalized power is a more accurate reflection of how hard you've worked. So I'll give you an example. If you ride at 150 watts for 1 hour, your average power will be 150 watts. If you do a high intensity interval set that takes you at 250 watts for X number of minutes, and then you recover at 80 watts, and then 250 watts, and then 80 watts, and then 250 watts, and then 80 watts, you can end up with that same average of 150 watts for the entire workout. Well, that's not really going to tell you the physiological strain or effect of that workout, right? It's a higher demand to do those high intensity workouts. So average power is really only taking those highs and lows and kind of squishing them down to a center line. Normalized power is intended to correct for that. And it's an algorithm that's built into the power meter in your data collection software. And that's going to be it takes a rolling average. So every 30 seconds, it will take that rolling average. So each second, the preceding 30 seconds is given a rolling average. So it does this every second through the workout, continually taking that rolling average of the preceding 30 seconds. Then it takes all those values and raises them to the 4th power. Adds them all together, takes the average of that number, and then takes the 4th root of that number. And that gives you the normalized power. And you can see that in real time on a lot of head units, and then you can see that at the end of the ride. And that will likely be different if you have a highly variable ride. So if you're doing hill repeats or high intensity intervals, your average power will very likely be lower than your normalized power because it's corrected for that variability. So I'll show you an example here. Here's a good example, this 3rd ride down. This is the workout here. My average wattage was 144 watts. 144 watts is very comfortably in my endurance zone or my zone 2. But if you look at my normalized power, it puts me more in my zone 3 at 165 watts. And why is that? Well, this was something that was more zone 3 and then zone 3 plus intervals, so it corrects for that, and it shows me that it was actually a harder workout. It was not an endurance type of workout. It had a different physiological effect. So that's what normalized power is showing you there. And if you see something very similar, that means you're more in a steady state workout, and if you see more of a divide, you'll know that you're more polarized or more variable. So normalized power doesn't really do anything for Zwift power in particular, but it's a good number to keep your eye on in terms of looking at your own fitness and the variability of your rides and how you perform. So normalized power usually gives you a better indication of your physiological strain than does average power. Then it will show you your 20-minute power, your 5-minute, 1 minute, 30 second, 50 seconds. It will show you the weight, it will show you your average heart rate, and then it'll show you your max heart rate. Now sometimes you will see numbers in red, and really the only thing that numbers in red show you is the highest and lowest values on the list. That's it. It doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. Maybe they could change that to orange or yellow or something like that, but people get freaked out when they see a red and they're on a list of people. It literally is just highlighting the highest and lowest values. That's really all it's doing. So you'll see that on your own layout. You'll see that as the group layout. You can see in this ride here, this group 2 group ride, I did the highest 20-minute power in this list here at 3.8 watts per kilogram for 20 minutes. So it's just going to highlight those things for you. Now let's jump into the events. If I click on one of these here, let me click on this group ride here. This is a good example. And this will bring you back to the events tab. See here, I'm over in events, and it's picked a particular ride here. And it shows you some things along the top. It shows you the name, it shows you what the date and time was, what the route was. It shows that all riders are visible. A late joining was allowed. There was a women's only category available. It shows you, I talked about the CVAS limits in terms of like the highly elite riders. Those do apply. This says the Zwift power category overrides watts per kilogram. So it's just telling you how it's categorizing the finishes. It shows you the overall profile, where your sprint banners and your power-ups can be found, and it just shows you a really good profile of the race here. And then you can kind of splice this down, right? You can see how the B group finished, the C group, the D group finished, or you can put all of them together. You can change the columns again, and you can filter out what you want to see, what you don't want to see. Again, watts per kilogram or watts, the same on that main screen. You can show 95%, so you can start to look at what those 95% values are, what they're going to be using for categorization. You can turn that off. And then you can kind of go through and see where everybody stands. Now this is where some of that information becomes more effective, right? Here's your finishing times, here's your time gaps, here's your average power over the course of the whole ride. So you have your higher performers here on the top, your average wattages, here's your normalized power. And then again, 20-minute, 5-minute, 1 minute, 30-second, 15-second, that's all here. So you can see at the top here, these are both red. It means that their 5-minute power and 1-minute power is the highest of the entire group. It doesn't mean that there's anything suspicious. It just means they're the top in the whole group. They're also an A+ rider, and it would make sense, right? Everything here looks pretty legitimate. They've got 65.8 kilograms here, 146 beats per minute for their average heart rate, 190 beats per minute for their max, and they're 180 centimeters. So there isn't anything that really stands out here, but it's just showing you that that's your highest level. They finished first. That kind of makes sense. And you can kind of scroll on through here and look at the other results, right? This person had the highest average heart rate at the 184 beats per minute. Nothing wrong with that, but you can kind of cruise around here and look at what's going on with all the different riders. So you can review the results of the race, and then you can click back into a particular rider or you and go back to that personal view. Now, another neat thing that you can do in the events tab, if you click on events, is you can look at events that are in the future. So it will show you everything for about the past hour or so and then forward. So if we pick some event out in the future, we can look here at this flat route race here. So that's going to be happening at 22:15. And it's going to show you that you can click on this and show more detail. It shows you how many people are registered. So you have 1 in the Cat A's, 5 in the Cat B's, 5 in the Cat C's, and 4 in the Cat D's. That's not necessarily everybody who's going to be in the race. That's just everybody who's registered. It shows you that it's 31 kilometers, that it's 3 laps. It covers Watopia flat route. And then over here, you will see some icons. And you can kind of hover over there and it'll tell you, oh, here's a women's category only. This means that results are going to be shown here with the trophy. With this white empty battery, there's no power up. The full battery means that there's some custom power ups available. This shows you that the algorithm gives you the full draft effect here. You can hover on this and it tells you something about the profile. There's a short, steep climb there. You have this icon over here. If you hover on that, it's only riders in your group that are visible, so you can't see the other groups. If there's multiple categories, you can only see yours and it won't blend them together. And then you can kind of hover on all of these things. You can also see in the terms of a series, usually these races come in a series, you can view the last week, you can click on the prior events. But then if you go back over here and we go and we click on this race now, you can see a little bit more detail. So it's going to take all of these icons and condense them on the top and show you what's applicable here. Again, you'll see the profile. And then if you keep scrolling down, here's everybody who's registered. So now you can do a little bit of scouting, right? You can take a look at what these people are capable of. Here's their categories. Here's their ranking overall, their names. You can kind of click in and creep on them a little bit. If they're attached to a team, that'll be listed here. It'll show you their weights. It'll show you their age category. So master, 60 plus, 50 plus, veteran. It's going to show you their height. And then it's going to show you some information about their 20-minute and 15-second power profile. So you're going to be able to see what they're capable of in terms of their 20-minute power and then what kind of sprint you might be looking at. So you can kind of see how you stack up against people who are registered in advance for the ride. So it can be very effective for you to use this to prepare. It's very similar to what you might do in the real world when you're scouting out who's racing with you to see what your competition is going to look like. But then if you go across the top, the rest of this is pretty self-explanatory, and I recommend that you just kind of float around here and you take a look. You can take all the people that you follow by clicking on friends, see their recent events. You can look at their TT events, any of their rides, workouts, things like that. You can kind of creep on your friends and your followers here. You can go into teams. You can see how teams stack up against, see I'm not attached to any teams, but I can see what the other teams are capable of. It gives you a contact website in case you're interested in joining a team. You can click on those and reach out. You can click on each one of these, learn a little bit more. It will show you different racing leagues. You can take a look at how these different racing leagues stack up. You can look at some cool information there, how those people in the league stack up against one another, gives you some more information, some series information. So if you've joined a series, you can go ahead and click through here and see what the results are looking like for that series. It breaks it down, shows you future events and what's going on there. Segments, you can go ahead and look at some of the common segments. This is a little bit better than using something like Strava, because this is more vetted in terms of Zwift power, so it's a lot more of efficacy in terms of the results here, right? It shows you some more detail. Here's Alp to Zwift. You can kind of look at how you stack up. You can also pick by age category and weight category, and you can pick just females only. You can look around in there. Your rankings, it will show you team rankings, individual rankings, and it shows you how you stack up. And then finally, here's the forum. Again, I mentioned that they're not going to be really supporting this anymore, but there's some valuable information here in the stickies. If you kind of go through some of the frequently asked questions, there's some stickies and you can go ahead and read through some of that information, and it'll be valuable in you learning. So now that you understand how the qualification system works for categories and then how you could potentially get disqualified and what you're looking at on the screen, the rest of this website is actually really easy to navigate. So with that baseline information, I suggest you cruise around, see what's useful for you. If you're interested in teams, there are definitely ways to feed into being on a team through Zwift Power. There's a lot of great stuff on this website. It's still going to be available for free. Again, things might change with time, but I think most of the meat and potatoes here are going to remain the same. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave them down below. I'll do the best that I can to help you out down there. I'll also put some additional resources and websites that might be able to help you down in the description below so that you can kind of learn a little bit more from people who might know a little bit more than I do. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll queue up 2 more Zwift videos over here, and as always, I will catch you in the next one. See ya.